Over the top? No, we had no over the top rules. We were totally reasonable, thoughtful parents who made solid decisions at every turn.
In 1973, something happened to Ron Howard that would leave a scar on him for the rest of his life. On the set of American Graffiti, co-stars Harrison Ford and Paul Le Mat began to bully him in ways that would later be described as cruel Opie-shaming. They hurled bottles near his car, locked him inside a trailer, and mocked him relentlessly for his childhood role on The Andy Griffith Show. At the time, Howard stayed silent, bottling up the pain, but the memory haunted him for decades. That was only the beginning of his complicated journey in Hollywood. For 50 years, Ron Howard would keep quiet about the darker truths he had witnessed and endured in the industry. Now, with the passage of time, he has revealed stories that few could have imagined, the on-set accidents that nearly cost actors their lives, the lawsuits that drained millions of dollars, and even the family challenges that almost tore apart his marriage. America's beloved director, so often seen as gentle, wholesome, and unshakable, finally admits that his road to success was paved with painful lessons. Ron Howard was born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, a small town where dreams seemed far away. His father, Rance Howard, was chasing opportunities as both an actor and a writer, while his mother, Jean, also worked as an actress. The family had very little money, and daily life was difficult. By 1958, when Ron was only 4 years old, his parents made a daring choice. They packed everything they owned into a car and moved to Hollywood. They hoped the move would give both of them better chances to succeed as working actors. It was a huge gamble, one with no guarantees. They ended up in a small house in Burbank, struggling to make ends meet while raising their little red-haired son. The strange twist of fate was that their modest home stood close to a major studio. This meant Ron grew up surrounded by the sights and sounds of cameras, actors, and film crews. Instead of attending a typical preschool, his education began on studio lots, where he watched carefully and learned how the business worked almost by osmosis. No one planned for it at the time, but that move to California didn't just shift their address, it altered the trajectory of the Howard family's entire future. Ron's first brush with Hollywood came unexpectedly. On January 1, 1956, when he was just 18 months old, he appeared in a movie called Frontier Woman. His father needed a baby for one quick scene and decided to use Ron. The tiny moment of him crawling across a set didn't seem like much, but in hindsight, it marked the very beginning of his long career. His parents were still financially struggling then, especially since his father had only recently left the Air Force. By July of that same year, Ron was even performing live in a theater play. Despite this early exposure, his parents were determined not to let him be exploited like other child stars. They refused to sign any long-term contracts for him until he turned 5 years old. That decision nearly crushed the family's finances. By 1957, money was so scarce that Rance considered abandoning acting altogether and moving back to Oklahoma to work as a farmer. Still, the family held on, convinced they were protecting their son's childhood. From the time Ron was born, his parents had one unshakable rule: no full-time acting before the age of 5. This meant turning down lucrative offers in 1957 and 1958, even when they were struggling to pay rent. The sacrifices were extreme, they pawned belongings just to scrape by. By the end of 1958, they seriously debated leaving Hollywood behind, but they pushed forward. In 1959, when Ron turned 5, everything began to change. That year, he was cast in a film called The Journey, and for the first time, his name appeared in the credits. Yet even with this milestone, it wasn't all happiness. On set, some crew members mocked him for his red hair and freckles, cruelly calling him freckle-faced freak. The insults devastated him. His father, who was also working on the same set, nearly lost his own job after getting into a heated argument defending Ron. The role only paid $12,500, but for the Howards, it was life-saving income. Around the same time, Ron's younger brother, Clint, was born on April 20, 1959. Money remained painfully tight, with the family sinking into debt equivalent to about $5,000 today. Still, Ron's parents were unwavering. They insisted he stay in public school and live as much like a normal child as possible, even as the pressures of Hollywood closed in. Then came the turning point. In 1960, at just 6 years old, Ron Howard landed the role that would change his life forever, Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. More than 300 children auditioned for the part, but Ron's natural presence and charm won him the role. The series premiered on October 3, 1960, and quickly became a beloved hit. It ran for 249 episodes, with Ron appearing in 243 of them. At the beginning, he earned $300 per episode. By the time the show concluded in 1968, his pay had risen to $1,000 per episode. But behind that success was tremendous pressure. As a child, he had to memorize lines, show up promptly, and perform with flawless timing. There was no live studio audience, meaning every laugh, every line, had to be perfectly executed on set. Ron adapted quickly, learning how to meet these demands. His character of Opie brought warmth and innocence to the screen, reminding viewers of a simpler, gentler time, which is why so many Americans fell in love with him. But while the show looked wholesome on the outside, Ron was forced to grow up quickly behind the scenes. Ron's relationship with Andy Griffith, the star of the show, became one of the most significant bonds of his life. Andy wasn't just a co-star, he was a mentor. He guided Ron through emotional scenes, told him stories between takes, and treated him with deep respect. Their friendship began when Ron was just 6 and grew over the years into something almost familial. But Griffith himself struggled with demons. He sometimes battled alcohol, and Ron occasionally witnessed his anger spill out in heated arguments on set. In one instance, Andy became upset after reading a harsh review aloud in front of the cast and crew. While moments like these were frightening for young Ron, Griffith always remained kind to him personally. He even helped him navigate some of his most challenging emotional performances. Decades later, in 1997, Andy visited Ron on a film set in Queens, showing how long their connection lasted. After Andy's death in 2012, Ron discovered something astonishing: they were distant cousins. This revelation gave their decades-long bond an even deeper, almost faded quality. But even during those early years, danger lurked. In 1962, while filming a fishing scene on a lake, 8-year-old Ron nearly drowned. The small boat he was in tipped over, plunging him into the water. Without hesitation, Andy Griffith dove in and pulled him to safety. The producers quickly hushed up the incident, fearing it could damage the show's wholesome reputation, so the public never knew. For Ron, however, the memory never faded. At that time, Hollywood had virtually no safety regulations for child actors. Children could work long hours, and accidents were far from rare. That near drowning left a permanent impression on him. Years later, when he became a director, he made it a priority that every set he worked on had safety protocols in place. By 1968, The Andy Griffith Show ended its run, and Ron was 14 years old. What should have been the start of the next phase of his career instead became a frustrating wall. Casting agents and directors couldn't see him as anything other than Opie. Between 1968 and 1969, Ron endured over 50 failed auditions. He told his parents he wanted to quit acting altogether. To make ends meet, he took small roles, like appearing on Gentle Ben in 1969, earning only $500 an episode, far less than what he had made before. In 1970, he lost out on the lead role in The Wild Country, another blow to his confidence. He later joined the short-lived series The Smith Family in 1971, earning $8,000 for 39 episodes, but the show was quickly cancelled. Behind his cheerful exterior, Ron was battling anxiety brought on by constant rejection. In high school, he poured some of his energy into basketball, averaging 12 points a game, but even then, he felt stuck between two worlds, the fading image of his child star self and his desperate desire for a new identity. Then came 1973. Ron, now 19, was cast in George Lucas's American Graffiti. On the surface, it looked like a dream opportunity, but behind the scenes, he faced humiliation. Co-stars Harrison Ford and Paul Le Mat singled him out, mocking him for his past as Opie. On July 15th, they hurled beer bottles near his car, shouting, "Dance, Opie, dance." Just days later, on July 20th, they locked him in a trailer, causing him to miss rehearsals. At times, they even spiked his drinks. All of this stemmed from their lack of respect for his background as a child actor. Ron endured it quietly, later calling it his one true moment of Opie-shaming. Despite the cruelty, he pushed through the shoot, earning $10,000 for the film. Decades later, Ford would apologize, but the emotional scar lingered.